Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the Finding Genius video series. We're joined with a very special guest, Kelvin Beachum. Kelvin is an offensive lineman who just re-signed with the Arizona Cardinals. Congratulations. And also on the side, Kelvin's also an angel investor in companies including Whoop, FreightWaves, FutureFit, Flexport, Border Road, and perhaps, Kelvin, you'll share a bit more about some of the other investments you've made or considering to make. More importantly, Kevin's also a philanthropist. He's backed World Vision for clean water. He's helping to battle hunger with Feeding America and Bread for the World. So pretty much a Renaissance man. But before we get into any of that, I think it'd be helpful to just hear more about you, your childhood, and your path to becoming a professional athlete.
Perfect, man. So hopefully my lighting isn't too bad. I know this is a video series, but kind of just a little bit about my background, man. Grew up in Mahia, Texas, about an hour and a half south of Dallas. A lot of cattle from where I came from. I always joke around there were more cattle in Mahia than there were people. But had a great upbringing, had both parents in my household. I was the oldest of four. We all played sports. That was our way out of getting out of Mahia. We all got full rides to go and play sports in some capacity, but also had the academics to be able to get into these schools and then thrive once we got there. Went to SMU, graduated my undergrad in econ and sports management, got my master's in organizational dynamics while training for the NFL Combine, so understand what it's like to train for the NFL Combine. Went to the Combine, ended up being drafted in the 2012 draft. Played in Pittsburgh for 4 years, Jacksonville for a year, New York for 3 years, Arizona for a year, and just signed, like you said, back to Arizona for 2 more years. So get to have a little longer stint out here.
So you're on your 5th contract. Could you go back to that day of being drafted and talk about the build-up and what that was like?
Yeah, man, it was interesting. Thought I was going to get drafted, kind of on the second day between the pretty much day 2 is like 2nd through 4th round, and 3rd day is kind of 5th through 7th. And, thought I was going to be, somewhat of a late pick on the 2nd day, if not an early pick on the 3rd day. And I remember the first day, all the first round picks were drafted. I remember kind of working at my dad's shop to kind of keep my mind busy as the draft was going. Day 2 was still in Mahia, just finding ways to keep busy. And I remember day 3, I actually drove to Jacksonville. No, I drove back to Dallas, day 2. Chilled up in Dallas, day 2. Day 3, went to Jacksonville, Texas to go to a family reunion and hung out with family. I remember getting a couple calls from Tampa Bay and the Broncos while I was actually taking a nap, in Jacksonville.
That's crazy.
And as I was heading back to Dallas, started getting calls, from some other teams about possibly pulling the trigger. Kind of late in the draft. This is day 3. And once I got the call, I was pissed off. I ain't gonna lie to you. I'm not gonna say it was just this joyous moment, which everybody hopes that it is. But it was a blessing to get drafted. But I was pissed off that it took so long to get drafted.
Well, you did it.
I don't let people forget where I was drafted. I was 7D. So I was a 4th pick by the Pittsburgh Steelers in the 7th round, pick 248. I was the last offensive lineman taken in the 2012 draft, the last offensive tackle taken in the 2012 draft, and still kicking, man. So
you've proven them wrong. 5 contracts later. So what was that? Can you talk about the first game too? Was there anxiety from SMU? Was it? Did it just kind of live up to expectations?
I'll take it to the first preseason game, man. The first preseason game ever. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
The first preseason game was we played in Philadelphia, and I remember the Star Spangled Banner, and the anthem playing, and I remember the flyover, and I remember the fireworks that were going off, and it was an emotional moment to get to that point. And then I remember my first start was actually on Thanksgiving versus the Baltimore Ravens, and they had Terrell Suggs and Paul Kruger, considered some of the best defensive ends at the time. and we had Charlie Batch, our third string quarterback, and we had to find a way to win to keep our hopes alive for the playoffs. And then I also remember my first home game, and Mike Tomlin. That's why I have such a just deep admiration for who he is as an individual. Mike Tomlin actually flew my parents up for my first home game against the San Diego Chargers. And I remember all those moments, man, all those little moments, up and down the life cycle of being a ball player that holds such a special place in your heart as you continue to go, through this journey.
Right. That's exciting. Well, given this is a lot of founders and VCs probably watching this, and I think they've all heard of you, obviously from your professional kind of the NFL role, NFL side of it, but also because you're an investor and a big supporter of a lot of founders in the space. If we just shift gears a little bit, since you've been in all these cities in New York and you've been in Arizona and Pittsburgh, what about those entrepreneurial ecosystems, or are there any kind of broad thoughts that you have in operating in each of those cities that stand out to you, or what you appreciate about each city and where founders are trying to build?
Yeah. I think about what was going on in Pittsburgh when I started to first kind of get into the venture landscape. And I think about all the robotics and all the drones, which is kind of where my love for drones and robotics come from, is from CMU, and it's from being in Pittsburgh and understanding how the revolution of robotics was starting to take place. If you know anything about Pittsburgh is still really big into kind of this green revolution and alternative energy and the mix of both oil and gas and renewable energy, because of, it used to be an old steel mill town, and now they've, kind of transitioned into renewable energy and things of that nature. So that was kind of the impetus of kind of where I started to get the bug. But it was really drones and robotics, and that was kind of the ecosystem that I was in there. In Jacksonville, it was more, kind of profitable businesses that I saw within that ecosystem. Founders who had, didn't raise much capital, were super scrappy, were gritty, didn't have, the big pond that you would have out in San Francisco and New York. To be able to acquire the capital, so found a way to just make money and just build kind of sustainable businesses there. And then you got to New York, and everything that's anything runs through New York in some shape, form, or capacity. And New York right now, especially on the venture side, is trying to make, well, I wouldn't say trying, but is making a name for itself with the exits that are happening with that, out of New York over the last, decade or so. And you look at how they're competing with San Francisco to try to have the best and brightest that are coming out of New York, and just was able to entrench myself in that ecosystem. It did help that MetLife Stadium was right across the water, so it would actually bring, associates, principals, GPs, founders, entrepreneurs, the whole nine to football games, and try to wind and down them for a little bit, especially those who were, New England Patriots fans. So, ended up getting the Boston connection out of bringing folks to Jets games. And then I look at what's going on here in Arizona, and it's actually interesting to see the founders that are out here as well. Don't have the same type of exposure that the founders in San Francisco and New York have. But you look at a company like Postscripts, who just had a large Series B done by Greylock out of San Francisco. And you just find that there are some interesting companies that are almost kind of hidden, in this ecosystem. So really enjoy being able to tap into some of these secondary markets that are not kind of primary for venture, and you'd be surprised that you find some very just interesting founders that have found a way to build great growth stage companies without the hype that can tend to come with those in San Francisco and New York.
And why did you decide to do this? I mean, why did you decide to start investing in founders? And also, I mean, it's not like your portfolio is just one sector, and it's not just really flashy names. I mean, it's a really interesting portfolio of companies that are actually performing very well beyond just the headlines. Mm-hmm. So how did you get into those? Why did you start doing it? And I guess that would be interesting too. There's more professional athletes that are doing it now, but this isn't, you've been doing it for a while too.
Yeah. I would say first and foremost, it was the opportunity to, one, find something to do when I'm done playing football. Honestly, that's where it starts at. I blew my knee out in 2015, and that's when things started to really become materialized and say, hey, this is really possible for you to be done playing football. Had to have reconstructive knee surgery, so I had a lot of time to think. And while I was thinking, happened to just fly over to San Francisco, and the Super Bowl happened to be out in San Francisco, and kind of got the bug while I was out there. And then secondly, at the end of the day, it's one thing to be an athlete and you hear 90,000 people, screaming at you or cheering for you or booing you. But I find that it is very special when you're able to celebrate and cheer for a founder or cheer for an entrepreneur or cheer for a CEO. And it's almost surprising to the CEO when me as an athlete is actually doing the cheerleading and supporting them and, pumping them up. So it's almost like this oxymoron, not oxymoron, but it's kind of ironic.
Right.
That I'm the one that's wanting to celebrate them. And I actually enjoy it, and it's a way in which I'm able to build authentic and genuine relationships while I'm playing. I'm not waiting until I'm done, but the relationships and the founders that are back to date are relationships that I've had. I think about Flexport. I met Ryan Peterson in 2016, 2017. And it's been a relationship that's matured over the years. When I met him, I was just now I was having my second child by then. I don't think he was dating his now wife, a partner, and he didn't have kids yet. So it's like I've seen, people mature over time. And, I think about the company. I think about FreightWaves. FreightWaves is not it's not in the Meccas. It's not in San Francisco. It's not in New York. I think about Whoop Technology. When I backed Whoop, my wife was like, why you put money into this company? Like, it's no way that this battery, because the thing is the battery was
yeah, right. I remember that
at the beginning, and the battery life, being able, you have to charge it, sometimes twice a day. And, the app, was kind of, buggy at the time, and it's been a journey. And I look at Whoop now and I'm like, man, you just never know. You support founders and you back companies, and sometimes it's hard at the beginning. And Will found a way to just thrive. I think about Future Fit and what Rishi has done over there. He was a founder that when I met him, I really enjoyed the fact that he had this huge and this gigantic chip on his shoulder to be able to show people that he can go out and build a sustainable company. And he's doing that. So it's been cool to just partner with some amazing people, some amazing founders. I think about Jessica Matthews in New York with Uncharted Power and what she's been able to build. It came from, I'm looking at a cabinet right now where the soccer ball and the jump rope are, where you would jump rope and then you would take the jump rope and put it into the socket and it would create light. Now she's building freaking technology that's a part of infrastructure in upstate New York. It's one of those things where, you saw it at the infancy stages and you've seen these things grow. I think about a company like Moroxa and the founder, DeVaris Brown, and what he's been building, on the cloud side, being able to be able to provide real-time applications to the cloud right now. What's the cloud movement that's, taking the world by storm. So it's been this journey of just being able to partner with amazing founders, amazing angel investors, amazing venture capitalists, amazing founders of VC firms, and just building real relationships. Even our relationship is we met in New York, when I hosted a dinner of all the principals, and associates.
It's been good
in New York,
Yeah, right. No, it's been great. And I think you've been a huge proponent for building out the New York ecosystem too. But when you also look at, I guess, what's really interesting is when you look at the athletes beyond yourself that you admire and kind of their mental fortitude and discipline for how they train and the way they approach the game and show up every day, are there certain similarities or things that stick out in your head between the founders that you've backed? So you just mentioned Jessica, Craig, Ryan Pedersen. Are there things that you've seen that are similar that, I respect this athlete and I see the same qualities in this founder? I think that would be interesting too to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think about Future Fit, and the chip that's on my shoulder still, is the same chip that he has on the shoulder. Like it's amazing. I think about, as a black woman in Jessica Matthews, what she's building and the slack that she's got for being, a technical co-founder, and she still found a way to thrive. So I think about, the not the underdog story, but this kind of overlooked individual that happens to go out and just prove people wrong. I look at DeVaris and what he's done in Moraxa. I just find that to be, even Ryan in Flexport, like, people's like, oh, there's no way he can go and compete with the FedExes and the UPSs and the SF Expresses. And that's something going to take a market share.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, it's one of those things where, you see these instances where a founder's like, I need to get from point A to point B. People have told me I couldn't get to this point, and now I'm about to get to this point. And for me, those qualities just continue to show up over and over again. And I would say just a common theme that happens to, I think a common theme throughout a lot of my investments is from a philosophical standpoint, is if I'm backing a company or a founder, how do they think about what can be built on top of what they're building? Because that then either empowers their particular sector that they're in and empowers the ecosystem. And then you have these organic network effects where CAC isn't, an issue. Marketing spend isn't an issue. And you're able to have this organic K factor that allows the companies to grow in a way that you want them to grow. And when you do want to put in, some money to increase marketing or, provide some awareness, you have real ROI on that. So one of those things that's been, I guess, a consistent layer in kind of a lot of the companies that I've built, other than Porter Road. Porter Road, I'm a country bumpkin at the end of the day, and I love my steaks. That's one of the very rare consumer deals that I did. But one of my favorites, man.
Is that why you stayed away from Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods? And
I'm not. I've been a huge proponent of Impossible Foods. I have indirect in a number of different funds, but Impossible Foods, I was actually talking to my wife about. I'm like, I ain't had an Impossible Burger in a while. We need to order something.
Right.
I don't discriminate. If I need to go be vegan, I can go be vegan. If I need to, be a steak lover, I can be a steak lover. So, but for me, Porter Road is one of those companies that, and Chris down there in Nashville has been one of those founders where, just have a deep appreciation of how he sees the world and how he sees the impact of the Angus industry. And like I said, somebody being from the country and understanding, Angus, I got black Angus, he has red Angus, and the meat from that red Angus tastes completely different. But that, like I said, is very one of the few direct to consumer deals that I've done, in my journey. But that's more of a, I like steak, so
yeah, of course. And actually, on that side too, you've done some in freight logistics, you've done some in drones, robotics, you've done some within sports techs and kind of like the performance enhancement side of it, like Whoop and FutureFit. When you look at sports tech specifically and companies that have done a good job of partnering with athletes to bring Whoop, where now all these athletes are using it and sharing their metrics live, and what is that process? I guess, what are the startups in sports tech that you're excited about? Where are opportunities that you think founders should be building for? And then the partnerships that those founders are good at building, how do they do that to engage professional athletes? When, you, LeBron James, everybody, there's so many other ones that are also out there that are just getting pitched all the time by the next sports tech startup. So it'd be interesting at what makes your radar.
For one, are you building out legit technology? Like, first and foremost, if you look at what Whoop has done, if you look at what FutureFit has done, if you look at what Tonal has done, they've built out as much as possible to be able to own as much of their product as possible. So it's not like they partner with this tech company or partner with this brand. Like, they've built a standalone company in essence. And I look for that when I think about, what's going on in the sports landscape. And then, I think that there's so many, I think the holy grail right now is where a lot of people are spending time and where I've seen a lot of deal flow is the monetization of athletes. There has been no company to date, in my opinion, that has been able to figure out how to monetize the brands of athletes. And I'm not talking about the top 1%. I'm talking about the entire long tail, or I would say 60% of athletes. There hasn't been a company that's done that. But for me, what I look for out of, anything that's kind of touching the sports arena is how do you have something that's differentiated that if you are able to get the wedge of getting athletes, can it turn into mass adoption? and you look at, the three companies I mentioned, they were able to get that wedge and then be able to expand to mass adoption. Tonal started with athletes and then kind of they've been able to merge into mass adoption. Whoop started with athletes and been able to merge into, athlete adoption. Mass adoption. Future Fit is kind of already mass adoption and kind of went after that market from the get-go. So you think about those companies, and for me, it's one thing to say, hey, I want athletes involved, but it's another thing to be thinking, hey, this is just a use case to be able to open the door so much more. Again, I go back to infrastructure. Are there ways in which you can change the infrastructure within the sports landscape, whether that's, baseball, football, cricket, soccer, what have you? You saw, Billy Bean do that with baseball, and now it's skyrocketed. But I look for founders who have just something different. And if you don't, I'm willing to give you my time and we can think about some type of advisory agreement and find a way to get it done there. But it's been a while since I've deployed capital within the sports tech arena. And it's so funny, man. I'm a huge proponent of courtside ventures. Love those guys, Vasu, Deepin, and Kai Bond. Love those guys. And we have this conversation all the time. What's sports tech? Because, it's one thing that's the sports related wellness. And then there's another thing where you're actually trying to sell into organizations, which I think is one of the hardest markets to try to crack and one of the hardest enterprises to try to get into, whether it's the NFL league office, the NFLPA, or the 32 teams that are in the National Football League, or right into, any of these NBA or MLB or NHL teams. Just find that's very hard, and a lot of teams want that competitive edge. So it's not, they're either trying to build it in-house or they're trying to keep it to themselves because they feel like that's the competitive edge. So, when you're trying to sell directly into teams, I think that's really hard. But if you're trying to build out infrastructure that would empower or speed up the latency, or speed up, right now is video content. If you're able to get and speed up that particular process, I think that's where the opportunities are. But still, at the end of the day, you have yet to see the type of investment from NFL owners and the NFL as a whole, as you've seen with the NBA. The NBA doing NBA Top Shot, the NBA really launching individual brands. You just don't see that, from my perspective, on the NFL side. So when I hear these sports, kind of sports-centric companies pitching, is how do you think about it? Who are you selling to? And once I hear who you're selling to, I can tell exactly how long you're going to last.
It's going to work or not. Right.
If it's going to work out, who's going to take you out if you get rolled up, et cetera.
Right. And I know we're running out of time, but I guess who would drive that, in your perspective, who would drive that change or that shift, especially at the NFL level? It's the players? So if Whoop was getting started tomorrow, would you advise them, not Whoop, I mean, they're already doing really well. Yeah. Let's just, if we say someone else.
I haven't played that scenario in my mind yet, man. That's a hard one. But just thinking about it, I'm like, man, that would be a tough one. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
So, no, I mean, would you think in this world of Instagram and everybody kind of the athlete having their own brands as well and their own following more than they did in the past, just through kind of reaching their audience and their fans, would you advise these founders to go and sell directly to athletes, to go and sell it to the league, to go and sell it to players associations? Like, how would you?
You got to go direct to the player, because the thing is you can't take the top-down approach. You have to take the bottoms-up approach. You almost have to think about it like an open source project, and your open source project for athletes. And if you're able to provide and create this cult following from an athlete standpoint, you'll be able to drive value, and that value will then be able to be used by the league. I mean, you look at companies like, and these are more direct to consumer brands. When you think about I wouldn't call it a war, but you think about Theragun and Hyperice. Both of those companies went the athlete route and then went up the food chain, and then you see, I think it was the NFL partnered with or put an investment into Hyperice, but it was so many athletes that were already in that deal before the NFL put money behind it. But it's one of those things where they had that relationship with the players well before they even started talking to the league.
Right. And so I guess as the last question, hopefully maybe we'll have time for one more, but you've been an outsider to the venture markets, but now you've been fairly active. You're involved with Courtside. You've made a ton of investments. You've invested in LPs. You brought VCs to your games. I'm still waiting for my ticket to Arizona, flight, first class, everything. But What do you think? I mean, as an outsider that's looking in, what are the problems that you've seen with how venture works, or with founders that you've helped raise that next round? Or kind of looking in holistically, what do you think are some of the areas that we need to change and how we think about it also?
Yeah, I think, pattern recognition is something that is huge. Who did the deal come from? Where did the founder come from? Who sent you the deal? I mean, I think that still plays a huge role. And I intentionally try to make sure that if I'm getting deals, I don't look at it that way. I really try to spend time with the founder and really understand the business for who it is, and who they are. But I think, just the patterns, because, I mean, the venture landscape has been so used to patterns for years upon years upon years and decades upon decades. And you've seen, the return profile of that pattern working out so many times, it's tried and true. But I do think that there is some shifting that's happening within the venture landscape. But the thing is, I'm big on the systems. Like, how do you understand a system? And once you understand that system, not how do you manipulate it, but how do you navigate it to be able to not only work in your favor, but be able to bring people along that could use that help and could use the door being open for them. So for me, it's not my job, or it's not what I aspire to do, to talk about or bash VCs and say VCs do this, LPs do this, GPs do this. Like, this is a system that we're, how do you understand that system to be able to navigate it and to be able to help people who could use the help, who can use the capital, who can use the network, who can use the resources, and then find ways to open doors to do so.
Right. Well, Kelvin, I really appreciate this. This was super insightful and interesting, and congrats on the contract again, and looking forward to seeing you out there and hopefully see you soon in person.
Perfect. I owe you a game.
Thanks. Exactly. Thanks, Kelvin. Talk to you soon.
Perfect. Talk soon.